Millhouse Quilts. Today we are going to continue assembling the top for Around the Village Square. Last time we made the blocks and we started sewing the blocks together in the center. And now today we are going to add the pieced borders. The first thing we have to do is piece all of our strips together, and we started this last time. So we have all of these pieces and we make sure that we scatter the colors, make them nice and random, because we have 20 different fabrics here. So I have my pieces here for side number 4, and I have made my corners, which are 4 slightly narrower pieces, and then I take a strip of inner border and sew it onto those, and this is what my 4 corners look like. Now I'm going to add one of those to each end of the top and bottom borders. And again, I'm choosing to have the fuzzy side of my fabrics up. I could have the flat woven side, it doesn't really matter, but I've got the fuzzy side. So this is one of the borders with the end part on. Now the reason we do that special end is because the inner border makes a really neat design on this quilt. We've put it on 2 sides, the inner border and then the piece border, and then notice how it looks like it's kind of woven together in the corners. That's the fun part. So we have our outer borders pieced, and now we're going to work on the inner border. And we have to piece 3 strips together to get enough length for the 2 sides. So in order to do that, you want a diagonal piecing, which means I take 2 strips and I lay them right sides together at a 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to sew from this corner to this corner. And I usually just eyeball it. If you want to stop and draw a line, you can, but you don't really have to. So a diagonal seam is nice whenever you're piecing multiple strips together because it spreads out where the seam allowance is. So what I'll do is take my scissors and I go up, and then I just trim right approximately a 1/4 inch, and then I trim the edge, and I go to the ironing board and press it open, and there you have it. Now to add the inner border to the sides of the quilt, we first of all measure the quilt top, and then we take our this is 3 strips pieced together, and it's going to be enough to do 2 sides. So I put them right sides together or wrong sides, doesn't matter, but I put them right together, and I know this is going to be about 58 inches. So that's longer than my table, obviously longer than my cutting board. So I have to kind of hang over the edge a bit. I take my measuring tape and I start with number 1, and I line that up with the very end, and then I carefully lay it on, just lay it on. I don't stretch it, and I go down the edge and I hold it very carefully so that I know that it's exactly even with the fabric. And I make sure that my ends where I think I'm going to have to cut is on the cutting mat. So I walk it over and I get to 58.5 is my magic spot. So I put a pin in, and then I always measure it 2 or 3 times. So I'll lay it on again, keeping it right even, walking it up, and it came out right on again. So I can trust my spot. So now I'll stop, put my ruler there and my cutter, and I will cut right there by the pin. And then I will have 2 inner borders. I always cut the 2 opposite sides together because then you know that they are the very same length, and that helps your quilt be straighter. I never cut single borders. I cut the 2 sides together, and then I cut the top and bottom together. So now that we have our inner borders ready, I have added them already to 2 sides of the quilt. The inner border is here, and I took the piece strip and I added it there. And I've got that on 2 sides, so I'm ready to do sides 3 and 4. And this is where you have to add the extra corners on. So I got 1 done ahead of time. And what I have done here is I have laid it out. This is where we have to make the cross work, but I don't want to sew the whole thing and then have it not line up. So what I have done is I laid it on top like this, and I matched up that this piece and this piece were the same, and then I just sewed a little bit to test it. And I open it up, and it looks like they're right on. So I'm good to go, and it can't shift on me because I've got it done. And I did that on both ends so that I know I can trust that this is going to be straight and it's going to create that really nice woven effect. So now the next thing to do is to put these together and pin them before I stitch them. Now, this kind of woven fabric has a lot of give in it, and I would trust the inner border to stretch less than all of these pieces. So I will sew it with the inner border on top and the pieced border underneath. And this is going to mean I can't see all these seams. They have been pressed together, but I'll just kind of work each one under the machine in the same direction when I get to it as I'm sewing. And then you have a finished top. And this is another version of Around the Village Square using all a taupe and beige kind of fabrics. And we actually have another one. This is one of our favorite patterns. Over here we used a little bit brighter wovens, but you can see it's still got the same cross piece right there. And this one used a bias binding, a plaid. This one is a straight one. And I think one of the tricks that makes this a nice pattern is because the inner border fabric is the same as the center of every square. So even though you have all these different fabrics, it unifies it, even though you may not realize it, but the little bit in every block is pulled together by the inner border. So Around the Village Square, go down to the park and have a good time. Happy quilting from Millhouse Quilts.